1 Samuel chapter 14 and verse 1 says, "Now it came to pass upon a day that Jonathan the son of Saul said unto the young man that bare his armor, Come, and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side." Notice this next line. "But he told not his father. And Saul tarried in the uttermost part of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is in Migron. And the people that were with him were about 600 men. And Ahiah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, wearing an ephod." Notice this next line. "And the people knew not that Jonathan was gone." And between the passages by which Jonathan sought to go over unto the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp rock on the one side and a sharp rock on the other side, and the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other Seneh. The forefront of the one was situate northward over against Michmash, and the other southward over against Gibeah. And Jonathan said to the young man that bare his armor, Come and let us go over unto the garrison of these uncircumcised. These next three words, this is the title of my message tonight. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. And the armor bearer, his armor bearer, said unto him, Do all that is in thine heart, turn thee, behold, I am with thee according to thy heart. Can I take a time out right there and say every pastor in America needs somebody like Brother Armor Bearer standing with them no matter what. And then said Jonathan, Behold, we will pass over unto these men, and we will discover ourselves unto them. If they say thus unto us, Tarry until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place and will not go unto them. But if they say thus, Come up unto us, then we will go up, for the Lord hath delivered them into our hand, and this shall be a sign unto us. And both of them discovered themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, Behold, the Hebrews come forth out of the holes where they had hid themselves. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, Come up to us, and we will show you a thing. And Jonathan said unto his armor bearer, Come up after me, for the Lord hath delivered them into the hand of Israel. And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, and his armor bearer after him. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer slew after him. And that first slaughter, which Jonathan and his armor bearer made, was about 20 men, within, as it were, a half an acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow. Shazam! Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, I don't know if you were following along real close there, but I present to you that what I have just read in your presence has to be considered the world's absolute worst battle plan ever conceived in military history. It's bad. How bad is it, preacher? Well, let's go back through this. I want you to see, first of all, Jonathan is going into battle. They are going into battle completely undermanned. Let's look at the two sides in this battle that's about to take place. Who do we have over here on the side of God and right? Jehovah God. Who do we have? We have Jonathan, that great warrior, and a guy that we don't know his name. Don't worry, we're not going to name him Elsie or Bessie. We're just going to call him Brother Armor Bearer. Is that okay? So we got Jonathan, and you understand what an armor bearer is. Back in the Bible days, you got the guy that's doing the fight. So Jonathan's out there. He's whacking and hacking Philistines with sword number one. He maybe decides he doesn't want sword number one anymore. He wants sword number two. There's Brother Armor Bearer. Trade him out. And maybe he gets in close contact. Maybe he wants an axe or something else. And so Brother Armor Bearer's there. Switch him out. So you got the guy doing the fighting and the guy carrying the stuff for the guy. 1 + 1. How many we got on this side? 2. Who do we have? How many do we have? They're going up against the garrison of the Philistines. The garrison is the military headquarters of an army. Up on the top of that mountain. How many reckons in a garrison? Oh, listen, good news. You got the director of church revitalization all the way from headquarters in Nashville. I've looked it up. How many are in a garrison? A heap more than the two of them standing down here. Now, we don't know. We don't know how many there were, but in the chapter before this, it tells us that at Michmash, where they're fixing to go, the Philistines had 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and soldiers as the sands of the sea. I refer back to my previous statement, a whole lot more than the two of them down there. Let's be honest with this. Let's call this what it is. This is a suicide mission. 2 against the whole headquarters of the Philistine army. They're going into battle. Would you agree with me? Undermanned. Oh, you say, preacher, I got it. It's bad. Hold on a minute. It gets worse. How could it get worse than that? Well, not only are they going completely undermanned, notice, second of all, they are going into battle while others who should care about this deal are unconcerned. I don't think there's any accidents or mistakes in the Bible. I don't think it's a mistake that we go from Jonathan and his great exploit that he's going to dare to do, and then we go, and where do we find our fearless leader? Where's Jonathan's daddy at? He's about 45 minutes away from the battlefield, and Saul is sitting under a pomegranate tree. And 600 soldiers with him. Must have been a pretty big pomegranate tree. Now, I don't know, you've figured out this weekend. I think of things a little bit differently. I just kind of envisioned Saul, he's sitting in a lawn chair. Maybe got some shades on. Maybe got 2 of them guys with them big fans fanning him, and he's munching on a pomegranate. Instead of standing on the premises, doing nothing but sitting in the premises. That's got to be kind of demoralizing to Jonathan, isn't it? Could we blame Jonathan if he says, if our fearless leader doesn't care anymore about this deal, he's sitting under a pomegranate tree on the sea to do nothing, why should I care about this deal? Why should I stick my neck out on the line if 600 are with him doing nothing? They're undermanned and others are unconcerned. Are you getting the picture? Oh yeah, preacher, it's bad. Hold on a second, it gets worse. How can it get worse than that? Notice, thirdly, they are going to the battle of their life completely unnoticed. Did you see that part where Jonathan never told Saul where he was going? So Saul doesn't know his son's gone. Did you notice that part where it says the people did not? I told you to mark that. People didn't know he was gone. That means they are going into the battle of their life, and nobody, absolutely nobody knows where they're at or what they're doing. You know what that means? When they get to the end of town, headed out tonight, there's not going to be any band playing, cheering them on, no signs of encouragement. There's not going to be any care packages. There's not even going to be gospel cheerleaders out there saying, Jonathan, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can. There's not going to be any text messages of encouragement. There's not going to be any cards. There's not going to be any care packages. And if they somehow are lucky enough to survive and get back home, there's not going to be a welcome home party. They are going into the battle of their life completely unnoticed. Got to be a real lonely place to be, don't you agree? You say, okay, preacher, I got it. They're undermanned. Others are unconcerned. They're going completely unnoticed. I got it. It's bad. Hold on a second. It gets worse. How can it get worse than that? They are going, fourthly, notice they're going on to an unlevel field of battle. Look, I'm a kind of an amateur. I love American history, love American military history. And I can tell you in the annals of our country, there have been some times when an inferior force, the side with less manpower, has won the day if you had 2 things going for you. If you've got the high ground in a battle, and if you have the element of surprise, you can get something done with less people. I hearken back to the days of the Civil War. In the battle in a place called Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, on day 2 of that battle, the Union line was wrapped like a fish hook. And at the end of that fish hook of the Union line, holding the end of the line on a place called Little Round Top, was the 20th Maine Regiment under the command of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. They were out of ammunition. The Mississippi Barksdale's brigade was coming up through the peach orchard, coming up the hill to destroy them. And some things, had they lost the end of that line, could have lost the war for the North. But you know what Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain did? With running out of ammo, he ordered fixed bayonets, and he ordered his guys to charge down the hill at the enemy with no bullets. And they so shocked the enemy that they won the day because they had the high ground and they had the element of surprise. Well, does Jonathan and brother armor bearer, do they have the high ground in this battle? No, they don't. Were you paying attention to this deal? They have to, by the time when they go to attack, they have to crawl up the side of the mountain on their hands and knees. So there's not even going to be any charge. And before they get, you got some cards in there. Pay attention. Hey, before they even get up to the top to attack, did you notice that part that said they had to go through 2 sharp rocks? Did you see that part? We read it tonight. That's somebody's phone. If that's the Holy Spirit, tell him I'm busy preaching. I'm doing the best I can. Listen, did you see the part about the 2 sharp? Did you see that those 2 sharp rocks had names? Yeah. Who knew that anybody names rocks? The one on the left was called Bozez. The one on the right was called Sina. Bet you're wondering what those names mean. Director of Church Revitalization, I looked it up before I came. Here's what Bozez and Sina in the original language. The one on the left, Bozez, you know what that means in the original language? I'm not making this up. I'm not being funny. It literally means rock. The one on the right, Sina, you know what that means in the original language? It means literally a hard or thorny place. Do you know what that means, ladies and gentlemen? Jonathan and brother armor bearer are starting this battle literally between a rock and a hard place. That was worth the whole weekend. I mean, that was good. They got to go through a rock and a hard place, and now they're standing at the foot of the garrison of the Philistines. Well, preacher, at least they got the element of surprise. Were you paying attention when I was reading? Jonathan puts his arm around brother armor bearer and said, brother armor bearer, here's the plan. First thing we're going to do is we're going to yell up there and tell them that we're here. Did you see that part? He said, we're going to discover ourselves to the enemy. That means we're going to let them know we're here. Are you getting this? Do you see why I'm saying this is the dumbest plan ever invented ever? He said, now, if the enemy tells us to stay where we're at, we'll stay where we're at. But if they tell us to come on up, we'll know that that's a sign from God that we're going to have a big victory tonight. Are you getting this? Brother Arbery said, if that's what God told you, I'm with you. So that's what they did. Yoo-hoo, Philistines, we're here. And did you hear it? Did you see? We read it tonight. See what they said? They said, come on up and we will show you a thing. You can almost see them high-fiving up there, sharpening their, hey, we're going to have a victory tonight. The little cowards have finally come out of the dens and the holes in the caves. I present to you what I have just described, what we have just read in those 14 verses, has to be considered the worst battle plan, the most hopeless, destined for failure plan in history, except for one thing. It was a secret that Jonathan knew that didn't anybody else know. Jonathan knew there was 2 of them standing down here. And Jonathan knew there was a heap of them on the top of that mountain. But Jonathan knew there was somebody else present on that field of battle that day. Nobody could see him, but he was there. Jonathan knew the God of heaven was looking down on that deal. And Jonathan said, here's what we're going to do. Before we go up, we're going to pray to the God of heaven to take a look on this deal, and maybe he'll fight with us. Now, notice carefully what he said. Jonathan did not say, we're going to yell up to God and demand him to do what we want him to do. Notice he was not a part of that TV evangelist, name it and claim it, nab it and grab it crowd that says to treat God like some celestial bellboy and order him around and tell him what to do. No, he said, we're just going to humbly do all that we can. We're going to go up the side of that mountain, and we may look bad when we get up there, and we may be rugged and bruised and torn, and we're going to pray to the God of heaven, and it just may be that he'll partner with us. And if God fights with us, Brother Armor Bearer, business is fixing to pick up in this deal. Because it doesn't matter to God how many are up there. If there's 1,000,000, it doesn't matter to God. Because he's God. He can do anything he wants to. So that's what they did. They climbed up the mountain to an army of thousands who were waiting for them. When they got up there, don't miss this part. Oh, this is good. Don't miss this. Did you see that part? They got up there, and Jonathan starts whacking and hacking Philistines. I had preached this. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I saw something while I was preaching it that I'd never seen before. It's pretty good when you get blessed by your own preaching. Amen. Did you see that? One night I looked at that. Did you see that part? It says, and his armor bearer slew after him. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, apparently Brother Armor Bearer got so fired up about this plan, he got up there and something took over him, and he said, phooey on this holding the stuff. He started whacking and hacking Philistines right with Jonathan. Bless God, there's a lot of reasons why we ought to get fired up about serving God and worshiping God and praising the Lord when we come to church, because you might get so excited, it might rub off on somebody else. Amen. How much do? We do so much looking around to somebody else, waiting instead of just praising the Lord, giving what he needs. The services we could have if we just quit worrying about everybody else and just do and give God what he deserves. That's what Brother Armor Bearer did, I believe. So you got two of them. They're whacking. And the Bible says they killed 20 in a half acre of land, an enemy that knew they were coming. I don't know about you, I think that's pretty good. But you could see them. They're getting tired. Their arms are getting weary. And the enemy they keep coming like a flood. They've done all they can do, but it's not going to be enough. And I didn't read the rest of it, and that's your homework. You go home and read the rest of the chapter. But let me tell you what happened. I believe, this is not in Scripture exactly, but I believe God looked down from heaven. He saw what was going on. He said, angels, would you come over here? Would you look at those two crazy fellows? Look I like those guys. And God caused a great earthquake in the Philistine camp. So now there's dust, rumbling, and everybody, the first rock concert, and they're rocking and rolling all over the place, and everybody's yelling and screaming, and there's mass confusion, and guess what happens? The Philistines start whacking and hacking each other. And all that noise, guess who wakes up under the pomegranate tree from his long winter's nap? Saul says, boys, I hear the sound of a war. Let's mount up. The 600 soldiers come with Saul, and they wipe the Philistines off the battlefield that day. All because one man was bold enough and brave enough to believe God for great things. I don't know that he and Brother Armor Bearer are standing down there. They're getting ready to climb that mountain. Maybe Brother Armor Bearer's having second thoughts. He looks over. Jonathan, do you think this could actually work? I believe Jonathan would have said, it may be. But I know this, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. Ain't nobody going to win a battle sitting under a pomegranate tree. So let's dare to do something for God. It may be. I believe tonight, that's the message. Here's the application, and we're done. I believe that tonight we have in common much with Jonathan and Brother Armor Bearer. We are also engaged in a battle. You do understand that, right? This is a battle. This is not a recreation room. This isn't fun and games time. We are in a battle, the greatest battle that's ever been fought for the ever-living, never-dying souls of men, women, boys, and girls. And our battle looks equally as bleak as theirs. We're in battle, and we are undermanned, folks. We're outnumbered. Listen, I don't think there's anybody here that's paying attention to this deal that would disagree with me. Back in the 80s, some of you remember Jerry Falwell, they started to put a Christian political group together to try to get involved in politics. They called that group the moral majority. The reality is today, ladies and gentlemen, in the world that we live in, we are not in the majority. I'm talking about Bible-believing Christians. We're in the minority. I mean, we can debate all day whether we're a Christian nation all we want to. The fact of the matter is we are in the minority. And it seems like getting smaller every day. And maybe you feel like that in your church, and we've talked about, so many. We have hundreds of churches that are struggling to and boy, you want to attract young people, but if you don't, these small churches, they don't have young people, so it's hard to get young people to stay, and it's just a vicious cycle, and then you're competing with the church down the road. It's got all the bells and whistles and smoke and mirrors and all of the big stuff. And then you got the things of the world, and everybody's so busy, and you got sports and dance and volleyball and basketball, blah, 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 everything. You get the idea. Sometimes I think our guys in our churches, we feel inadequate. We're undermanned. And then, are there others that are unconcerned that should care about this deal? Certainly. It can get pretty depressing when we work and you're here on a Sunday night. I'm not talking about you, but boy, it can be discouraging when you're working for the Lord and you're doing 10 different things in the church, and then you look over somebody maybe is not as faithful, and we'll get that Martha complex. We'll get our eyes off what we're doing for the Lord and get our eyes on what Sister Fluffyhead's doing or what Brother Blabberjaws is not doing, and we'll lose our joy for our service. Others are unconcerned. That's kind of demoralizing. By the way, that's always the way it's going to be. I pastored for 21 years. I tried to get everybody to do what I want them to do. It didn't work, ever. There's just always going to be some people that get more excited about things than others. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. I wish I'd figured that out. I'd still have a full head of hair before and then sometimes we labor seemingly unnoticed. Listen, you ought to be thankful for what you have. A lot of churches struggling, a lot of depressed pastors, a lot of people mad at their pastor, and the pastor's mad at his people, and it's just sad every Sunday. It's like a funeral. Be thankful and grateful for the church that you have. True story, talking about pastor appreciation. A man I know, the church voted whether to do something for pastor appreciation. It passed with an 11-10 vote. And he had to go get his own cake and set the tables and chairs up and put it back down. I bet that was a glorious night for him and his family, wasn't it? Yeah, it seems sometimes like we're laboring unnoticed. And let's go out of the church for a minute. Let's go into our lives. What is that impossible garrison that's in your life tonight? What is that situation in your life that you've looked at it and it seems like there's no way possible, no human way to solve it, and it's just a heartache or a heartbreak that you just don't know? There doesn't seem any human way to win victory, and it just seems impossible. It's an impossible fortress. You got something like that going on in your life? Let me say this. And this is what I want you to get out of this whole deal. Really, this is my whole message in everything I do in my job. Whether you believe what I'm about to say, whether you really believe it, will determine victory or defeat in your Christian life, and it will determine whether our churches live or die, survive or thrive. Here's what I believe. I believe that the same God that Jonathan called on that day on the field of battle is the same God that you and I serve today. If you believe that, say amen. Amen. And I believe that God has just as much power as he ever did. Yes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Yes. And he not only wants to do, but he delights in doing the impossible. Yeah. But you know what he's looking for? He's looking for somebody to partner with. Somebody that's willing to take their impossible situation, their broken home, their financial situation, their emotional problem, their broken church problem, or whatever it may be, their broken marriage, put their hand in the hand of a nail-scarred Savior. And say, God, here's what I'm going to do. I don't know how. I don't think I have the ability, the smarts. I can't do this, but I'm going to keep on climbing. but I'm trusting you. And Lord, if you'll look down on your unworthy servant as I do my best, Lord, just maybe you'll come on the scene and you can do it. Doesn't matter. You're the God of the impossible. I'm going to give it to you. And if you'll partner with me, it just may be that we can see something miraculous happen. Are you saying, preacher, do you believe that God can still do the miraculous? He can do the miraculous in a church. He can do it in a life. I absolutely believe that. And I have seen this play out time and time again in my life and my ministry. If I could take you tonight to just outside of the place where I pastored for all those years, Creston, Ohio, in a little housing development there, there is a couple, still live there, by the name of J.P. and Nancy Coons. Nancy Coons prayed for her husband, J.P., to be saved for 40 years. J.P. was a good man, but he was a lost man. How many know sometimes that's the hardest person to win? He worked in the auto industry there in Cleveland. When he retired, they moved out to our little community, and he would come to church. Nice guy, but he's lost. 40 years she prayed for him. I'd go and visit him. I'd witness to him. JP, don't you think it's time to get right with God? He said, preacher, I'm just biding my time. I wanted to say, biding your time. JP, you're no spring chicken. I mean, he had breathing problems and all kinds of other things. I'm biding my time. Today's the day of salvation. He'd come and service. And one Sunday, I don't know why I did this. Not something I normally do. I told the sound man that day, I said, get the song, The Anchor Holds, song I sang in this service. I said, get that. I'm going to sing that for invitation today. That song's about 5 minutes and 15 seconds long. J.P. Coons told me later, he said, preacher, that song's 1 minute too long. Because he's under conviction. He is gripping the pew. And about 4 minutes in, after 40 years, amen, he looked at Nancy and said, let's go. And after 40 years of praying for him, Nancy thought he meant, let's go home. Nancy got out in the aisle and headed to the door. And when she got to the door, she turned around and JP was headed to the altar. I will never forget it as long as I live. I mean, I'm the preacher. I'm supposed to believe that these things happen. That, you know, you ever get to a point where you just give up? You give up hope that anything can happen, like it's a hopeless case? I could not believe what I was seeing. I walked over to him. I collapsed in front of him like I'd been shot. I couldn't get anything out, but he was already praying. Don't you love to hear somebody pray that doesn't have all the these and the thous? He was saying, Lord, you know what a rotten person I've been, but God, if you'll have me, I'll give you everything I've got. And JP meant it, because listen, he was the most faithful church member and still is. Listen, I told our church one time, bless God, I believe if we give JP Coons a dress, he'd come to Women's Auxiliary. Since I've had this job, I was in Crossville, Tennessee in camp meeting. And JP and Nancy, here he is, carting that oxygen tank, drive 8 hours to be there. His daughter, Tammy, was working with our children for the Christmas practice and for the Christmas play in children's church. The sound man ran down the hallway and he yelled, it's your dad, it's your dad. Didn't tell her whether he died, had a heart attack, what, but she knew because I could hear her screaming like a Comanche warrior then down the hallway. Hey, you say, preacher, does that happen every time a lost person comes in, they get saved like that? No. There's a lot of lost people come into our churches that leave lost. But every once in a while, if somebody gets a burden, somebody prays, somebody sheds some tears, if somebody is effectually fervent in sowing in tears, we have the Bible promise one day we'll reap in joy. Can it happen? It may be. It's not going to happen sitting under the pomegranate tree of laziness and unbelief. See, here's the last thing. I'm done. God knows I'm a kind of a simple-minded person. I'm just not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I need visual things to help me. And I get them from God, and then I give them to you. That's just the way it is. And God really helped me with this. If we could get this picture, it is not about our ability. God doesn't need our ability. He just needs our availability. Jonathan wasn't some superhuman superhero. He wasn't Spider-Man climbing up the wall. He was a human who did all he could, and he partnered with a great God. Wasn't anything superhuman about that little boy and his lunch, but was when he placed it in the hands of the man that made and molded the worlds and the moon and the stars and the sea. That's when business picked up. Not about us. has everything to do with who we're partnering with. Would you partner with him today? And God help me with this. A couple years ago, I was down in Georgia preaching a conference revival, a Free Will Baptist conference of churches. They came together. I preached the revival. All the churches came together that week. And it was real close to the Army base at Fort Benning, Georgia. So some of the guys took me down during the day to Fort Benning. Now, just off of the Army base at Fort Benning, there is an infantry museum that the Army has put together, which gives the history of the United States Army in all of America's battles. Man, it is awesome. I mean, I'm a patriotic guy anyway. I went through that thing. I got out of there. I was ready to give me a flag, give me a gun. I mean, put a terrorist or a communist in front of me. I mean, I was ready to go. Fired up. It was great. Then they said, we're going to go on to the base at Fort Benning. Now, get this. Since all the terrorism that happened down at Fort Hood in Texas, you got to go through, for a civilian to get onto Fort Benning, you got to go through the main gate. You got to go, and they got to take your name and your license, and then they run an FBI background check on you. Then some guy gives you a paper, which you got to take to the second guard shack, and you got to go through all this rigmarole. Maybe tonight you'll look at me a little bit more importantly when I tell you I didn't go through any of that. I didn't even go through the right guard shack. There is a little guard shack right next to that infantry museum. Here's what, if I'm lying, I'm dying. This is what happened. Drove up to that little guard shack. The guard there took my license. No questions. No FBI background check. You know what he did? He stood up, saluted, put me right on to Fort Benning. That's right. Me. Oh, I forgot one detail. I was not in the car by myself. I was riding in the car with my friend, David Trogdon. He was driving. I was the passenger. Free Will Baptist United States Army chaplain, David Trogdon. 2 weeks before I got in the car that day with him, newly decorated Lieutenant Colonel David Trogdon. Here's what he did. He took his lieutenant colonel badge. He put my license underneath it. He gave that to the soldier. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at my license. That young man saw lieutenant colonel. He, whoop, whoop, choo, choo, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Whoo. Had nothing to do with Jim McComas. It had everything to do with who Jim McComas was riding with. What about it tonight? Is there anybody willing to be a Jonathan? To say, God, I'm just crazy enough to try this. I got an impossible situation. I got a need tonight. Lord, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to keep on serving you. I don't see a way. I don't know how you're going to do this. But God, you're God. You're still God. And you're still able. I'm going to trust you with the rest. And it may be. Lord, I believe. Same God that Jonathan called on, I can call on from this altar tonight. Amen. Good. You say, well, you really think it's going to happen? It ain't going to happen sitting under the pomegranate tree. It's going to happen when somebody dares to pray a great and audacious prayer and say, God, I need something bad, and I'm willing to step out. I believe he is still in the miracle working business. And I believe, look up here, I'm easy to spot. I believe that it still may be.